Coming up on today's show, presented by OnX, Know Where You Stand with OnX.
We would close the teal season at least Sunday before duck opener.
Could a guy go and shoot target, 3 hen mallards?
Flyway approved 5-goose bag.
Broadcasting from the Mid-Migration Outfitter Studios, this is the Finding Fur and Feathers Hunting Podcast.
How much direction are you getting from the governor?
The Minnesota DNR had reintroduced him into this area.
I don't know, maybe you didn't want me to tell the story on the show, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
I knew you were going to go there.
Open and close the entire hunting season.
Oh,
that's
really?
pretty easy.
The Finding Fur and Feathers Hunting Podcast is brought to you by OnX. Know Where You Stand with OnX. By Haybale Heights on Devil's Lake. Visit haybaleheights.com for more. By Ottertail County. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. And by Lake of the Woods Tourism. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Well, duck season in Minnesota may be over, but that doesn't mean that we're not talking about it right now. Some of us, you think about ducks and geese all year long, no matter what season it is. Some people are traveling south. In fact, I'm jumping in a pickup with Corey Loeffler and heading south here very soon to chase some ducks and geese around and do some filming and taking pictures and just getting out of Minnesota for a little bit to go south where some of the seasons are still open. But we've been talking about this for a long time here on this radio show, some potential changes to the waterfowl season in Minnesota, what they are, what they could mean, when they could take place. We've discussed a number of these potential changes, and we've been letting you know about the survey that was going to be coming in January. Well, it's here, and a lot of you may know that already. Some of you may haven't seen it yet. There's been a number of people I've talked to on social media that have already taken the survey, and some questions have come up about what's in the survey, what does it mean. So I wanted to just kind of break it down and talk to the DNR a little bit to get some answers and some clarifications if we can on some of these things. So, gentlemen, I appreciate you being on the show. Steve Cordts is a Waterfowl Staff Specialist with the Minnesota DNR. We've been on talking about ducks many times on the show. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time. Also, Curt Vacek, the area wildlife supervisor out of Appleton. Curt, how's it going?
It's going great.
We've had
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. We've had a few discussions about this, and of course, then Dan Amundson is joining us as well once again this week. Dan, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I know you're curious about, you're 20, so you got a lot of time to shoot ducks here in Minnesota over the next 800 years, and or so, give or take a few. But so I know you're very interested in some of these potential changes, and I want to just talk about why this survey has come out. Maybe Steve, you can touch on this. I know. You being with the DNR, you're constantly hearing from hunters out there, well, you should be doing this, or why are you doing that? It's kind of a thankless job what you guys do. I feel for you at times, and there's a lot of things I agree with. There's some things I disagree with. I feel like some people should use a little bit more tact when they express their suggestions to the Department of Natural Resources. So you guys have a tough job sometimes. So I know there's always been a few things regarding the Minnesota duck hunting season, Minnesota waterfowl season that you probably hear about year after year. But there's also the question of increasing hunter participation, recruiting new hunters out there. So I'm assuming this survey is kind of to address both of those things. Am I right?
Just maybe for a little background, we're actually doing, in my mind, 4 different public outreach issues. So one, we asked our managers to reach out to avid hunters and groups and sportsmen's clubs in their work areas. That happened in December. 2 is the online public input we're doing now. 3 is a mail-out survey that is going out, I think this week, to about 7,000 waterfowl stamp buyers. And then 4 is in March, we're going to do a webinar and take comments after that. So We're pretty much covered the board in terms of any sort of input, and to me, it's good. We'll see what the info is, but we've never done that much outreach before, so I'm excited about it.
Yeah, well, I know people are always asking for more communication, more lines of communication with the Department of Natural Resources. So this is giving the hunters out there more options to offer their opinions. What would the difference between is there many different? Can you speak about the differences between the online survey and the mail-out survey?
So the mail-out survey is a whole lot more detailed, a whole lot more questions, and we tried to kind of pare the online stuff down a little bit. I think probably the one or two differences in the online input, we did not ask about swan or crane hunting seasons, which is on the mail-out survey. Okay. And that's, other than that, and, a whole bunch other info and details, that to me, that's about the only major difference.
Okay. I was going to ask about that because I didn't see a question about cranes or swans on the online survey. And I know that was brought up to me from a number of people that would like to see a statewide crane season or a potential, some sort of even a limited harvest lottery on tundra and trumpeter swans in Minnesota. So we'll look for that in the mail out survey. And then the March webinar, will you have some of the results from the surveys then? Will that be a further discussion, or do you have something else planned for that?
Nope. We'll have results from the online input and sort of early results from the mail-out survey. Probably enough feedback to certainly discuss results. We probably won't have the final report or final data until this summer, but by then we should have enough to at least, the hope is to kind of review all the input.
What would you like to see, when could some of these changes be implemented, and is there some sort of threshold of support that each topic needs, or are you going to basically take into consideration what the public is saying out there and say, okay, well, this is probably what we'll do, or is there some sort of threshold like that?
Not really. The way we make decisions in the department, it's certainly pay grades above me. Our director and commissioner make waterfowl season decisions. But I think we're, it's not a poll, it's not a vote. We just want to. We're trying to gauge support for any changes we could make, and I guess we'll see what the input is. But there's no threshold, at least in my mind, on some percentage or anything like that.
Okay. And before we get into the survey and what's on it, how long is the survey online going to be available?
Till the end of January.
Okay. Well, there was. I want to talk a little bit about the survey. I went and took it. I encouraged many people to take it. Hopefully, they've been taking it too. Part of me wishes I would have spoken to you guys a little bit before taking the survey, but the people that did had some questions. So I'm glad they did, so we could get a few things cleared up for anybody else that hasn't taken it yet. Curt, maybe I can ask you, we talked a little bit about some early teal, and you're in my neck of the woods here in western Minnesota, and I know I've talked a lot about the early teal. That's been one of my biggest pushes in all this, and the whole reason for it is to be able to hunt late season mallards. Now, the nice thing about where we live is we have some open water later in the season. I understand not all parts of the state have late season open water, so going later into the season isn't always on the top of their minds like maybe it is for us here in western Minnesota. So I've pushed the idea, if we have an early teal season, that we can have those days in September. They don't count against our 60-day regular season. So we could potentially move the regular season start back just a little bit and be able to hunt later into the season. I noticed, or Curt or Steve, whoever wants to answer this one, I noticed on the survey there was really nothing talking about that particular scenario. Just if you wanted the early teal season or if you didn't. Could there be, if we implemented the early teal season, what is the reality of being able, would we push back the regular season start? Is that a possibility, or would we still try to have the regular season start at, say as early as September, 21st or 22nd, whatever it was here, fairly recently? Or is there a reality? Could we actually push the start into October if we do an early teal season?
I think I'll let Steve answer that specifically. From a manager's perspective, in this area, I agree with you. We've always, in most years, we have some late season opportunities. Especially for mallards, and I mean, that's what a lot of guys want. Is that late season mallard hunt, and so I've always been a proponent of trying to capture that late season. And of course, it seems like, whenever we do extend it, the next winter, we freeze out early and you don't have the opportunity. And everybody's saying, why didn't you give us an opportunity on the front end? But I agree with you, the teal season could provide that opportunity. But I don't know if it would mean bumping the opener back on the regular season. Steve would have to answer that.
Yeah, I can weigh in, and on our mail-out survey, we asked preference for opening date.
Oh, okay.
By zone, and we also asked if you want a teal season, how long do you want it? And I think the options were 0, 5, 9, and 16 days. So to some extent, I think it depends on like how long, one, if we would do a teal season, how many days it would be. So, if it's a short season, 5 days or something like that, we probably would not delay the opener. If it's a long season, I think we would certainly consider delaying the opener.
Okay, that makes sense. And then if you did, say we did the long season, I'm assuming that would be 9 or 16 days. Would you have, say, a 5-day period in between, so a few days to let the birds rest a little bit, or would one run right into the other? Like
our early goose season right now, we close it Sunday before duck opener. So my guess would be we would close a teal season at least Sunday before duck opener, if not earlier.
Sure. Okay.
So Steve, what is the earliest that teal season can start?
September 1.
Okay.
Would you be in favor of starting it that early? And would you, if it was 16 days, would it just run September 1 to September 16?
I guess typically we've opened early seasons for geese on Saturdays. So my guess would be that we would open on like the first Saturday in September for some number of days, and not really on the first, but
sure, that first
again,
Saturday.
Yep.
And could a guy shoot teal and geese on the same hunt?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And then, but it would be that early season would be any teal, right? Any blue wing or green wing or cinnamon, should the case.
Yep.
Be,
correct.
Perhaps. But if we did a 2-week bonus blue wing teal that coincided with the regular season, it would be blue wing teal only.
Correct.
Do you know the reasoning behind that? That comes from the framework, right? That's not a Minnesota decision necessarily. That's what you guys were given.
Nope, that's a federal Fish and Wildlife Service framework. So a state can either have an early teal season or a bonus blue wing teal season, and it's one or the other.
Curt, how much do you hear about Youth Waterfowl Day?
Not a whole lot. Maybe a little bit more now that my son is that age, and so I get a little more feedback from his buddies and their parents that are out and about doing it. But the times I've participated in it locally, it seems pretty quiet on the landscape. That's my vibe.
Dan,
what about yours?
Well, yeah, Dan, I know when you were younger, we took you out on Youth Waterfowl Day, you and some of your friends. We actually introduced, do you think we introduced some of your friends to waterfowl hunting because of Youth Waterfowl, and are they still doing it? Or do you think it worked?
For one, so with the two other kids that we've taken out, one, I think it definitely did work. The other, not so much. Just wasn't his thing, but it was not only was it a great introduction to hunting for both of them, but one, he didn't get into the hunting thing, but he still loves to go shoot trap or go to the skeet range, shoot skeet. So it was we got him introduced to a sport, might not have been duck hunting, but now he's comfortable around guns. He's comfortable around it. From a family that grew up without guns, without anything, no idea of hunting whatsoever. But the other one, he's still going every opener. So yeah, I think it does work. It was a fun day for me. I know every kid I talk to that still hunts, they love Youth Day. It was one of their favorite days of the season.
Do you think though, do you think it would have been different if you had some adults that just brought you out on a regular season hunting day? And what difference would it make if those adults left their shotguns in the truck versus if they shot along with the kids? Do you think that would make a difference?
I think it can. It's a group by group thing, I think. So, you can get some of these adults that get so caught up in the hunting aspect, they forget about their kid and they just want to shoot ducks, right? And so having them leave their guns behind, it really puts focus on the kids. And if you're trying to get someone introduced to duck hunting for the first time, you want to make sure they're comfortable. You want to make sure they're taken care of. We all know duck hunting isn't always the most comfortable sport. It can rain, it can snow, you're going to get wet, you're going to get dirty, but by trying to alleviate some of that, at least on the first hunt, so they're not miserable. And I think by having the adults leave their guns behind and be focused on the kids, it's about the kids. They're going to be comfortable. They're going to have a better time. They're going to enjoy their experience more. And then you can slowly start to gradually get them into hunting with your adult group or whatever. Let them go on Youth Day. Let them get used to it. If they seem ready, let them go with you guys on opener.
So one of the arguments you hear against Youth Waterfowl Day is that it disturbs waterfowl, whatever. It might puts a little bit of pressure on some of the ducks. I'm not sure I believe that necessarily, but if, say, Youth Waterfowl were to go away, Curt, for the people that are out there trying to introduce kids, do you think they need a day to do it? Do you think that it does give them the extra nudge to try to bring kids out there? Or do you think, especially if we had an early teal season, that if somebody wanted to introduce kids, or maybe there was some day, a weekend during the early teal where, I don't know, you highlighted kids, whatever. I don't know what the right answer is there, but do you think people that want to introduce kids could just bring kids out and introduce them during the early teal season anyway? Or do you think we have to have that Youth Waterfowl Day to actually get that done?
Well, I think Dan kind of hit the nail on the head there. As far as soon as you take the guns out of those adults, it's a whole different approach by the adults And I, speaking for myself, when I take my son out hunting during a regular season and I have a gun, I'm a very intense hunter. And I think some of that comes through where, I'm not as relaxed and patient with my son if he's making mistakes or whatever, or even my dog. But, take that gun out of my hands and now I'm just a mentor. And I'm way more relaxed, and I think it is way more enjoyable for those youth. And then, that's me, and I imagine that's the same for a lot of adults, a lot of parents. Where, if they're there to just mentor their son or daughter on one of these youth hunts, they're going to try to make it fun and more enjoyable. And if you can do that if we do have an early teal season and we can have that some kind of youth experience during that early teal season, I think that'd be kind of the way to do it if we could.
How, Steve, what's the likelihood of keeping Youth Waterfowl Day if we had an early teal season?
Yeah, good question. I don't have a good answer right now. I think it depends. One, if we do it, and then two, like how long the teal season would be.
Sure.
So I don't have a good answer, but I certainly agree with both Curt and Dan's comments. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and it's she has hunted with me, and it's different. On youth day versus normal season, if I have a gun with me. So I don't know. So I guess that's why we're taking input
Sure.
now and just see what the responses are.
Well, I could see if the early teal season ends up being, say, a 5-day season, I could see you having that youth waterfowl / military weekend, which I'm for. There's a military question on the survey. Should military get a weekend to hunt? I'm all for it. They should be able to hunt for free. I have no problem with that whatsoever. You could do a youth waterfowl / military weekend, do it the same weekend realistically, and then have that shortened early teal season, even maybe the Monday through Friday right after that, or I suppose you'd want to do it over a weekend, but I could see it happening like that. If we had that early teal season, the number one complaint, or let's see, what's the right word for it? The number one argument I hear from people against the early teal season is that somebody's going to be stomping a wood duck into the mud because they shot it by accident. How real is the concern for mistake ducks out there? Because I feel like that argument is a little overblown, and I feel like if people make mistakes, it's going to happen. It's going to happen during the regular season. It's going to happen during an early teal season. But how many of those mistakes are actually happening? Because teal are kind of small, and if you spend a little bit of time, sometimes you got to spend a little bit of time hunting to really get good at IDing birds. I understand it can be intimidating for people, but how real is that concern for mistake ducks?
Yeah, I can weigh in on that. So back in 2014 or 15, we had Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, all opened early teal seasons, did spy blind work, experiments to sort of assess the non-target take for 3 years. And I think the non-target take was something like 6%. And the criteria from the Fish and Wildlife Service was up to 25% non-target take. So way below the non-target take level. And, states around us, I don't know until we actually opened it. Teal season here, we certainly have more diversity of breeding ducks here, but I don't know that our hunters are any better or worse than other hunters in other states. I think they would figure it out and not shoot too many non-targets, but I guess we won't know until we do it.
Did you have something, Curt?
Yeah, I was going to ask are you implying then that there would be some kind of monitoring or assessment to see what that non-target take is?
Yeah. So if we open a teal season, we would have to do a 3-year experiment and with spy blinds and a bunch of staff, essentially trying to watch hunters and see what they shoot and don't shoot at. And that's, I guess, kind of in place if we want to open a teal season.
So can I ask then, when they're monitoring in Iowa and these other states with the spy blinds, are they doing enforcement at the same time, or is it just strictly collecting data?
Great question.
It's up to the state. Some of the states have to enforce like an illegal take, and some do not. So I don't know in Minnesota what we would do if we opened it, but certainly in other states, COs have been involved in like the spy blind work.
And then if there was a legal take, maybe you don't know the answer to this because we don't know it yet, but if a CO does catch somebody shooting a wood duck during the early teal season, would it be a similar situation as if somebody shot, say over the limit during the regular season or something similar like that?
Yep. It's certainly not legal, but I would have to talk to our COs and figure out if they have to go and enforce it, or do they keep watching and just let the hunters keep hunting, or
That's interesting. Okay. And we're the only state in the Mississippi Flyway that doesn't have an early teal season. I want to point that out before we move on to the next topic on the Waterfowl survey, unless you guys had any other questions about our discussion about early teal.
Well, I've got one thing, actually,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Dan.
So I guess going along with that, worrying about taking different species or wood ducks, whatever, mallard, I believe Wisconsin doesn't let hunters shoot until sunrise, so you don't get that half hour before. Is that something that could be done here to alleviate some of that concern? Because, you're shooting that half hour before. Sometimes you are just shooting at silhouettes. It's hard to see, especially on a cloudy day.
Great question.
Yeah, and if we open a teal season, it would start at sunrise and not a half hour before.
Great. Okay. That's a great question there, Dan. And I also just want to emphasize, I like shooting teal. Don't get me wrong. My biggest push for an early teal season would be so we could push our 60-day start back a little bit so we can shoot mallards later in the season. I wanted to get that out before we move on to the next one. There's a question about motorized decoy restrictions, and currently in Minnesota, what is it? You can't use them for the first 2 weeks and then not at all on state lands, right?
Correct.
So this question is, should we remove all restrictions and use them wherever, whenever?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that is something that has been on the minds of hunters for a long time. I don't know. Personally, I wouldn't see a lot of pushback on that. Do you still hear from people that think, mojos or motorized spinning wing decoys could be an issue? Have you heard anybody argue for that restriction? Yeah. Any of you guys?
I still hear it, particularly from, the old timers that have that nostalgia for the classic waterfowl hunts, and they've been hesitant to accept motorized decoys in any way, shape, or form, from the get-go. And, they kind of hold on to that tradition.
I don't blame them for it. I appreciate the old school duck hunter 100%.
Oh, yeah.
I also don't have any issue with using motorized decoys. I think it's one of those where it should come down to the choice.
I think from a manager's perspective, for the WMAs, I just want to see it simplified one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's closed on WMAs altogether, but it's open on WPAs, federal WPAs. And to me, that adds confusion. And so as long as we can standardize things and be consistent, and the more black and white it is, the better for everyone.
You hear about confusing rules a lot, and the motorized decoy, where and when you can use it and all that. I mean, every year we hunt probably more than the average guy, Dan. And every year, how often do we say, when can we use mojos again?
Yeah.
What is that day?
Every year. Every year.
Yep.
Every year. And then that's the same with the 4 p.m. closure. Like I don't mind the 4 p.m. closure that much because I don't generally hunt ducks in the afternoon too often. I'm usually scouting for ducks for the next day. And I like to know that if I'm scouting ducks at 5 p.m., that nobody's going to go in there and bump them before I come back in the morning to hunt them the next day. But at that same time, there's been trips that I'll take early in the year, say during the split in the central zone when we close. Sometimes we go up to the northern zone where hunting is still open, and we'll go and try to shoot ducks up north somewhere. And then we'll be like, oh yeah, it's 4 o'clock. We're only on a 3-day trip or whatever it is. You try to maximize your hunting time. So I see the argument for eliminating it. And then again, just for consistency, so that there's no question about how late you can hunt on what day and what day it changes. What do you guys think? What are you guys hearing about the 4 p.m. closure rule?
Well, for the most part, I've heard kind of that same sentiment, like, just get rid of it. Saves on confusion.
Sure.
I think anytime we can simplify and be more consistent, it's going to be a good thing, and especially for recruitment as well. You don't want to have our regulations be too daunting and intimidating for a new hunter. The youth can learn from a mentor, but a lot of times your adult onset hunters, I think, they might shy away from waterfowl hunting just because it might be a little too intimidating. So if you can, usually when I think about these regulations, the first question I have is, okay, what will the impact be on the ducks? What will the impact be on the resource that the regulation applies to? And if there's really no impact on the overall populations or overall take, then the next question I ask myself is, okay, will this change simplify the regulations? And if so, it's like, we might as well do it. If there's no impact on the resource and we can simplify, might as well do it. And then the last thing is the public going to accept that change? And to me, the 4 p.m. closure and the motorized decoys, I think those kind of fit that bill in my mind. But
I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, the resource is number one, of course, and from everything I'm reading on here, the research has shown that there's been no impact, and especially with fewer hunter numbers and in the name of recruitment, making things simpler and easier is always better. So that being said, I want to throw a weird one at you guys. I sent you this in an email, and you guys knew I was going to ask this question, and you even asked me to clarify it a little bit. But I've heard about some states out east that have had Sunday closures for hunting, and I always looked at that as like a blue law, where like even in North Dakota, a lot of things couldn't open until noon on Sundays. Looking into it a little bit further, I've heard people talk about, well, if you close, say your duck hunting season, you can't hunt on a Sunday. Well, that's just going to add days to your allotment of days to duck hunt. Just a wild question that is probably not realistic at all, and it would definitely add more confusion to Minnesota hunters and hunting regulations. But what if I'm just trying to spitball ideas on how to hunt mallards later season. Realistically, that's where all this is going. But what if we close duck hunting on Mondays, and then for however many weeks that is, 8 weeks, whatever it is, could that potentially be a way And has it ever been discussed to say close on Mondays, and that would add, say, 8 days onto our season, essentially let us go 8 days later into the season? Has that ever been talked about, and like how far of a unrealistic goal would that be?
I got to ask, how'd you come up with Monday? I would pick Wednesday.
Well, yeah, I guess I was just throwing Mondays out there.
Yeah.
Just because I know a lot of people, Mondays are always the day I feel like everybody's just got to
regroup.
Work. Yeah, everybody's got to work or whatever, relax. So.
Well, I would say,
I would pick
weekend.
Monday, just because like Saturday, Sunday are busy, lots of people out, but it's certainly been discussed, and that only applies to the Atlantic Flyway. It's never been discussed here. I don't. I would have to think about it more, but I don't know that it's a terrible idea. But it's kind of out of the box.
You could expand that a little bit and say, instead of having a split,
right?
Say if you closed Tuesday through Thursday, and then you could avoid a split and run later too. But
sure. I know that's a tough one, but I was just thinking about it. Like, you pick the day that's least likely for people to hunt. I mean, for the majority of people in any case. I think North Dakota's got a weird Wednesday, like shooting Canada geese. I don't know if they still have this, but I know when I lived over there, you could only hunt geese until 2 p.m. or something on Sundays and Wednesdays, or when it's on odd and even days, or when you're not shoveling snow. I don't remember exactly. See, that's where it gets really confusing.
Not very simple.
Right. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm just, again, trying to find ways to add days onto the end of the season because as we've discussed in the past, and I've talked to other people, I used to say, give us a 70-day season in the Mississippi Flyway, or 74 days or 100 days. Give me 1,000 days if you can, please. But the difference is not what happens here in Minnesota, but more when you add days to the hunting season to the guys down south and the pressure that would put on our same ducks. So I understand that adding days and going longer is a little bit tougher for us to do. So I'm trying to find some alternative ways to work within our 60-day framework. So moving on to the next one, one of the questions on the survey is overwater goose hunting. If you can, Steve or Curt, whoever wants to take this one, explain where that rule came from and what areas it applies to and why those areas specifically were chosen.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I can take that. When we initially started our early Canada goose seasons, you couldn't hunt geese over water statewide. And over the years, that was kind of minimized. And at present, you can't hunt geese over water in the Northwest Goose Zone. Carlos Avery, Swan Lake, and Ochita Refuge. So pretty small areas, but the rest of the state, you could hunt geese over water. And we don't have any data that really shows it's effective or not effective. So we have a couple of pretty small areas where we restricted, I guess. So we're thinking about maybe getting rid of those.
And that was mainly to try to reduce pressure on the birds to keep them in those areas, right? So guys could hunt them in fields.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if you'd have a lot of people. I mean, I'm all about not busting the roost. And I think Sean Stahl said it best on this radio show one time, hunt the birds when they go out to eat at the restaurants, don't hunt them at home. But again, that could be one of those simplifying rules. And as long as there's other waters around, generally they might find a different roost. But unless they get really, really pressured, I don't know if they would leave the area unless they're already thinking about migrating because of weather or daylight or other reasons. So that one, Are you guys? What do you guys have a gut feeling one way or another if that might go away?
This is Curt. I don't really have a gut feeling. It seems like I'm getting mixed signals depending on who I talk to. I think the reason, we wanted it removed in this area was, our local goose numbers were climbing, and we're dealing with depredation issues and trying to knock that population down and looking for whatever means we could to increase that harvest. And, you do have some hunters that, they aren't set up to hunt field hunting. They're just set up to water hunt.
Right.
And we wanted to provide that opportunity in the early season.
Yeah, that's just the September season, right? That restriction
Yes.
is there? Okay, sure. So it wouldn't conflict with duck hunters necessarily, but just in the early season is meant for reducing the local population. So ideally, you want people to shoot those geese anyway. So I could see that restriction going away. Speaking of open water, this is an interesting one, and I've had some people make comments that they don't like the idea behind this open water duck hunting question on the survey. And I could be wrong about this, but I think I feel like the spirit of the question is to increase more layout boat type hunting. And then maybe there are some circumstances where you could put a duck boat in and it's kind of hard to get real, really concealed in vegetation. But what a few of us have imagined is somebody going out right in the middle of the lake somewhere and just anchoring their duck boat and throwing a raft of decoys out in the middle of a lake somewhere, which could be a problem or could potentially be a problem. Not that lakes are real busy in the fall, but I could see some duck boats and some duck blinds getting set up in some weird places. That's what this would mean, right? You could essentially set up anywhere?
Yes. We've had open water duck hunting restrictions since 1915.
Wow.
More than 100 years. It's offered on Lake in the Woods, Superior, Pepin, and Mille Lacs right now. We're the only state other than Wisconsin that restricts it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Any other state you can hunt anywhere. And yes, you could, it's layout boat hunting, or you could go out and anchor with a boat blind. And we have never allowed it, other than a couple lakes that we added in, I think it was 2014. So I don't think we're probably thinking about doing it statewide, but we just want to get more input from hunters on it. And I don't think a lot of hunters will do it.
Right.
I have a layout, or I had a layout boat. I've hunted in them. It's pretty fun, but I don't think a lot would change if we did it. But again, we want to get input from hunters.
Yeah, I think layout. I would love to do a layout boat hunt. I think that would be a lot of fun. It's something that's been on my list. I want to do it for sea dogs real bad, actually. But I think the biggest concern I've heard from people is just duck boats getting set up, in random places. But I didn't realize that was offered in a lot of other states that's already happening. So that's interesting.
I think it might simplify some things right now too, because to me it is a little gray, and that the boat has to be concealed with natural vegetation.
Sure.
Can you cut that vegetation and cover your boat up and then sit outside the vegetation? Does it include boulders and rock bars? Can you sit out on a rocky point? Or, so there is some. And then the other thing is floating a canoe down a river.
Oh, sure.
Jump shooting. So there are some gray areas there, and if it was just opened up to open water hunting, they would do away with those gray areas too, I think.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that actually helps. That explains, that kind of clears a few things up with that regulation right there. Let's move on to the next one. This has been a big topic of discussion too, the splash duck bag limit. Now, this is essentially, it's a 3-year experiment, and it allows you to go out there and shoot 3 ducks and be done. 3 of any ducks and be done. And that would be, I'm assuming, geared towards new hunters that may be wanting to learn a little bit more about duck hunting, a little intimidated by duck identification. It comes back to this duck identification. What, maybe you guys, maybe Steve, you can kind of explain where this idea came from, what you would like to see, what the goals of this splash duck bag limit is, and what the long-term results could be based on what you find out.
Yeah, so South Dakota and Nebraska this fall will implement that. It's kind of a national policy or whatever, and when hunters buy their license, they have to pick between Tier 1, which is just a like normal duck bag, and Tier 2, which would be a 3 duck of any sex species bag limit. So they pick when they buy their license, same season length, and they'll do that for 3 years. So the option in Minnesota is not next year, or it's many years down the road. But I thought it was reasonable to ask now, just because we don't do public input that often, to see if hunters were interested in that. And I think, as you said, it's probably more appealing to like brand new hunters than existing hunters, but you could shoot 3 of anything. And we'll look at the flyway level and kind of look at the results from the Dakotas and Nebraska and see what happens. But this would be like many years down the road.
Okay. When do you think you'll find out how it went in South Dakota and Nebraska?
Well, I think we'll get the report like next fall after the first season, and like see how many hunters did it, and they're trying to monitor harvest and every year thereafter.
Okay, so they're doing it in 2021. They didn't do it in 2020? Yep. Okay. Oh, okay. I was thinking they did it last year. Gotcha. Curt, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to point out that, having the conversations with, some of the hunters ahead of time here on this one, they're quick to point out, I wouldn't like that, and I think what folks need to remember is it would be an option, like right. Steve said. So even if you personally don't like that splash bag limit, you can side with the Tier 1 and go with the normal bag limit. But so the question is, do you want that option available to other hunters that might want to use it? Right. I think that's the way to look at it. Do you? You might not like it, but somebody else might like it. Do you want to take away that option for them, or do you agree they should have that option?
Having the option between the two is important, I think, and an important distinction that people need to realize is there. It's not going to be one or the other. It would be either or. One question came in. One guy said, so if I buy the splash duck bag limit license, can I go out and just shoot 3 canvasbacks? Or, could a guy go and target 3 hen mallards? Or I want to shoot 3 redheads today. So could I go out and shoot 3 redheads?
Yes.
Okay.
Steve, so that begs the question I has, you've looked at harvest data for many years, and you know the kind of the average bag limit by hunters every year. Now, if we had if hunters did apply this splash duck, could it potentially increase the overall harvest because they don't have to be selective? And would it be easier for some hunters to reach that three bird limit if they have that option?
Yeah, my guess would be harvest would decline. Not, maybe not by species, but again, you can shoot 6 ducks now, and you could only shoot 3 with the splash bag limit. So
right, but very few people shoot more, even though the limit is 6. Very few people shoot more than 3
right. So,
on any given day.
Right. So they're not going to shoot 3 of whether it's hen mallards or cans. It just it's not going to happen. But again, I guess we'll have to see what happens in South Dakota and in Nebraska this fall. But yeah, I think harvest for those people would be lower than higher.
Let's stay on bag limits here, but let's move to Canada geese. This has been discussed, I know, for a number of years. There's a 3-bird limit during the regular season here in Minnesota, 5 birds in the early season. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 5 birds is for our local Canada goose population, a resident population in Minnesota, whereas dropping it down to 3 birds was because of the migrating geese that come through, particularly that eastern prairie population, Canada goose. How are the EPP goose numbers, and how different, with the Dakotas? I know they get, less pressure than, say, Minnesota, but how, they can shoot 8 geese a day. They got to be shooting EPPs over there too, right? Like, how different are they, and can the EPP population, is that a consideration with the bag limit, and can they handle a 5 bird per day limit?
Yeah, I can start with that. And our flyway approved 5 goose bag for every state in the flyway for this fall. So we can do it if we want to. EPP geese, we still monitor them pretty well with surveys and banding, and their population is doing well. Probably, I guess, a little different in terms of like where they concentrate. Like in Curt's area, we don't have a lot of birds at Lac qui Parle anymore, but certainly the populations are doing fine. Dakotas have up to 8 goose bag limits during their normal season. So a 5 goose limit for us. We have a lot of geese, and both resident and migrant populations seem to be doing pretty well.
Did you have something, Curt?
No, my only comment on the bag limit again is simplify.
Sure.
And it's another one of those things where I get to the regular season and I got to look back. Okay, what is it, 3 or 5? What are we at now?
Right.
Last year was 2, whatever. It's just one less. I mean, you still need to read those regulations, right?
Of course.
It's one less change due to date that you have to worry about. So if it was 5 across the board, I'd like to see that, or I could see hunters wanting that just for simplicity.
Now, because of COVID, I know they haven't been banding Canada geese, so I'm assuming that we need some data before this increase would actually happen, or do you think we could see, if hunters are in favor of raising this Canada goose bag limit, how soon could that potentially take place?
Yeah, this fall.
Okay.
It's approved by the service, so we could do it this fall.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to
using motors on wildlife management areas, this is a tough one for me because I like making some duck hunting hard. And I think that makes for better hunts for the guys that want to put in the work. Now, there have been many times I've been trudging through a slough with water right at the top of my waders, or I'm in a duck boat, and it's like, gosh, I got to go all the way across this thing so the wind is right. And then, if you got the wind at your back, shooting divers, I could really see this, when we're on private water and we're shooting divers. Boy, there's so many times we got to track down divers with your boat and your motor. It's kind of nice to have. So I can see the benefits of having and using a trolling motor versus a big outboard. Of course, it's going to be a lot quieter. It's going to be a lot better for the environment and less disturbance, which is the idea of using electric versus gas. But I don't know. What are you guys hearing from people on using trolling motors on WMAs?
I'm getting mixed messages again. I think for the most part, guys are with you where they don't want to see them on the WMAs. But, my worry is this, WPAs, federal waterfowl production areas, they do not allow them. So now again, if suddenly you allowed them on WMAs, I mean, we have bodies of water that are shared by WMAs and WPAs. A guy starts out with a motor on a WMA, but he's going to the other end, which is WPA. Does he have to turn the motor off? Get rid of the motor altogether, that kind of thing. And then the other issue I'd point out is in my area, especially, on some of these WMAs and WPAs, they have fish in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
let's not tell anybody about that, though, Curt. That's a secret.
I won't say which ones. Some of them do. But, as soon as you say, okay, you can have trolling motors on, and we standardize it with WPAs and WMAs, now you're going to have guys trying to duck hunt and guys trolling around with a trolling motor fishing.
Yeah.
Again, it's up to the people can input however they want. I'm just pointing out, some of the issues I've, based on talking to people, what I'm hearing.
I definitely would like to use a trolling motor in the summer on some of those for fishing, but I know that if it were allowed, the fishing would not be anywhere near as good as it is without trolling motors.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I just
and that you could say the same for the duck hunting too.
Right. Exactly. Gosh, yeah, it's a tough one. Could there be any sort of compromise where some waters, some trolling motors are allowed and some aren't? Would that make it too confusing?
Well, I think we have that right now, right? Marsh Lake, the upper half of Marsh Lake is motorized. Loch Parle Lake, upper Loch Parle Lake, you can use motors on. I know there's some other larger WMAs where motors are allowed. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, if you start making a building on that list of where you can and where you can't,
confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and just to add in, we have about 50 feeding and resting areas.
Right.
Some you can use trolling motors on. You can't use outboards on any of them, but so some you can, some you can't. And yeah, I agree with Curt. I've heard kind of the same thing, kind of mixed opinions. But again, that's why we're taking public input and online input and trying to see what hunters think.
So if I have an outboard on my boat and a trolling motor, if I put the outboard up and not use it, can I still take the boat out there, or does the outboard have to be completely off the boat?
Nope. You can troll or paddle as long as you don't run the outboard.
Sure. Okay, cool.
Well, we're wrapping things up on this waterfowl survey. I've got one more. It's kind of a question, kind of a statement, a little bit. And Steve, I think you maybe mentioned that there may be more detail about this in the mail out survey that's coming. When is that survey getting mailed out?
This week, I think.
This week, okay. And that was 7,000. There were 7,000 people picked that had purchased duck stamps that'll be getting this. Okay. Do you know how were the 7,000 chosen randomly, or how did that process work?
So we picked so many per north duck zone, central duck zone, and south duck zone, and the metro. It was I think 1,700 per those 4 areas. If that makes sense.
Sure. So there's a sample size from each zone essentially, and then plus the metro. Okay. Well, because I don't want to beat a dead horse on this, but my big thing is trying to get some days later in the season, when the big flocks of mallards are coming down, to be able to hunt later in the season. So when I read the splits question on the survey, I was a little disappointed that it all said, September 25 through whenever, and then in the north zone with no split, and then September. It was a splits question, but I guess I went into it looking at it as a starting date question. So I think I just interpreted the question wrong, because I was looking for a way to say, hey, I want to start the season later, but that wasn't in there at all. It was just more about the splits. Do you like the way the splits and the zones are? Which if I were to offer 2 cents on the zones and the splits, I know, Dan, you and I talk about this quite a bit, because you went to school up in Bemidji, so you spent a lot of time up in the north zone where you freeze up. You like the start date and the end date kind of where it's at, right?
Yeah, especially up here, because I've been up here for 3 years now, and this year was the first year I hunted into November up here. Everything else was, last year on Halloween, everything was frozen. We were done, except for the big bodies of water, and that's just really frustrating to only have a month and a half to hunt.
Well,
to shorten that would be terrible.
As tall or as long as the state is, however you want to describe it, it's hard to manage a waterfowl season for the entire state. So I've been a fan of the zones, and I don't mind the splits in the central zone where I'm at for 5 days, because usually once we get past that first week or whatever, a lot of the local birds are kind of pressured. This year was 80 degrees for those 5 days that we were closed here in the central zone. It was 80 degrees. The last thing I wanted to do was go duck hunting. It just, the ducks weren't moving. It didn't feel like duck weather. I liked the split, and it gave me 5 days later in the season. I like the way the central zone is. I'd like to see it maybe just push back a little bit, of course. And then the southern zone, I know the guys in the south hate the 2 weeks or the 10 days, whatever it is. They hate the extended split in the south zone, because they feel like they miss out on some of the hunting down there. So I don't know what the right answer is. Ideally, guys, let me ask you this. If we implemented a teal season, let's just throw a hypothetical out there to wrap up this interview. It's so hypothetical. Say we started the early teal season, and say we did 16 days. I don't know if part of me wants to do 9 days. 16 seems like a lot, but let's just say we do a longer early teal season, and then we push back. So say you do the teal season kind of in the middle of September, and you run it for 2 weeks. So say the second and third week, and then the fourth week of September, you close it. And then you open up the regular season at the beginning of October or right at the end of September, and you do your 60 days. If that scenario were to play out, would the splits remain? Or would this be a way, or would you get rid of the splits at that point?
Yeah, I guess I can weigh in. I'm a northern duck zone hunter, and certainly no split in northern Minnesota, and I would say a shorter split statewide if we did that.
Okay.
But it kind of depends how long a teal season would be.
Sure.
If it's 16 days, it may be different than if it were 5 days.
That makes sense. Well, I guess that's a lot of it's going to come down to what type of an early teal season we have. Well, for the record, for whatever this is worth to you guys, I am in favor of an early teal season, maybe a longer one. Maybe it's even
Oh gosh, you don't want to make it too confusing, but whatever we can do, and we can run our 60 days here in the Central Zone in any case, and start it maybe that first weekend in October, and you could run through without having to have splits here. And I know maybe you could alleviate some of the frustration from the guys in the South by doing the same thing and eliminating splits down there. It's a tough job. I know managing for waterfowl hunters in Minnesota is not an easy job, and we all have opinions, and we all like to tell you about them. So I appreciate you guys coming on and listening to my opinions, of course, and helping us answer some of these questions about the waterfowl survey, the online survey available on the DNR website. You can find a link to it on the Sporting Journal Radio Facebook page as well. That is available through the end of January. So January 31st, Steve?
Yep.
January 31st, and then there'll be a mail-out survey that select people in each zone should watch for coming in your mailbox this week. Fill it out and send it back. I know I am sometimes terrible about filling out some of those mail-in surveys. I apologize if you guys have sent me some and I haven't filled them out. I try to fill them all out at the same time. The online ones are easier for me just because I lose track of my mail sometimes because I'm that kind of guy. But fill them out, watch your mailbox, and then we'll obviously help people get informed about the webinar in March, and we'll look forward to hearing the results of this survey. Either way, guys, I know it's a tough job, so thanks for everything that you guys do, and thanks for the time here on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Finding Fur and Feathers Hunting Podcast, part of the Sporting Journal Radio family. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts, or visit us at findingfurandfeathers.com.
Looking for winter adventure? Might as well pick a place with over 1,000 lakes. Ottertail County, Minnesota is in the middle of everywhere, offers a simpler pace, and has something for everyone. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com.
Ice fishing season is here. This winter, plan a trip to Devils Lake, North Dakota. Not only will you have the chance to catch their legendary perch, but this year, Haybale Heights has been catching big walleye after big walleye. And they're doing it from a mobile, comfortable snow bear. No matter how cold it is outside, you're warm and toasty on the inside. Learn more and book a trip today at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com.
Come ice fish the famous waters of Minnesota's Lake of the Woods, the walleye capital of the world. Experience full-service resorts featuring heated fish houses, ice transportation, meal plans, and sleeper house options. From the Northwest Angle to the South Shore, Rainy River, and Baudette, the Midwest's #1 ice fishing destination. Walleye, sauger, perch, and northern pike. Minnesota's Lake of the Woods, best fishing anywhere. For more information, log on to lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
OnX Hunt. Ever heard of it? Next time you see that guy at your local shop who always punches his tag on a stud whitetail, ask him. He'll tell you about the most trusted source for mapping, with nationwide landowner names, private and public land boundaries, including walk-in areas, map tools to mark spots, and the ability to view your maps without cell service. And that's just scratching the surface. It's your time to be known as the big buck guy around town. Download the leader in hunt mapping on Google Play or the App Store. OnX Hunt. Know where you stand.